Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell, joined by attorney Cesar Gavidia, and we're going to talk about one of Cesar's success stories in a claim against Guardian Life Insurance Company. I think they're called Guardian Life Insurance Company, but it's a long-term disability insurance claim. And in these videos, Cesar, we like to talk about the history of the claim, how you were able to help the client, what was the basis for denial, and then provide some tips for people that they could take away from this to either help them in their appeal if they're doing it on their own, or some tips to help prevent a denial down the road if they have Guardian disability benefits. So let's get into first the background of this particular long-term disability claim.
Well, yeah, it definitely was Guardian Life Insurance Company. Sometimes, particularly with older policies, you might see Berkshire Life Insurance Company. But in the context of this case and this client, this was an employee benefit case, a policy that she had through her employer, and it was through Guardian, and she became disabled as a result of a number of things, as often happens. It doesn't always necessarily have to be one single medical issue. There could be several conditions or comorbidities and different things that cause a particular disability for somebody individually or collectively. And in this case, it was kind of the collective whole of all of her disabilities that disabled her, as well as some of the individual medical issues. Our client was a VP of sales and operations for her company. So it was a pretty demanding job, and even a physical job. It did require her moving around. It really wasn't classified as a sedentary type of occupation where she was just sitting at a desk all the time. And it really also required a certain degree of responsibility and management and overseeing of people. She was diagnosed with Sjogren's syndrome and with psoriatic arthritis, which are two autoimmune diseases. She also had been diagnosed with a bilateral knee arthritis, and these conditions, Guardian found that she was disabled from when she filed her claim and notified them that she could no longer continue working in her occupation. During the course of that claim, she went to one of her orthopedic surgeons who recommended that she have a knee surgery, a particular knee surgery, an arthroscopy, to kind of clean out some of the things and to fix some derangement there in her knee. And following the surgery, which the surgeon deemed to be successful, they basically released them with no restrictions. Okay, the orthopedic surgeon in this case was just seeing her for her knees, wasn't seeing her for any of the other conditions, any other disabilities that she was claiming.
Who was treating her for her other medical conditions?
So she had a rheumatoid arthritis, she had a family physician, she's had even other doctors who might have been seeing her for comorbidities relating to depression and things like that, but mainly followed by those three doctors for those three separate things. But as soon as Guardian, and as they often do, requested medical updates, the orthopedic surgeon that had done the surgery on her knees had filled out the form that everything was fine and that she had no restrictions or limitations resulting from her knee issues.
Related to her knees only?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. But, this is how even just some mistake or an indication one way or the other in a form by a doctor could make a whole claim basically be compromised, and that's exactly what happened to her.
Yeah, but so did they initially approve her claim?
They did.
For how long were they paying her?
So they'd already been paying her for almost a year.
Okay, so they knew about her other medical conditions. Exactly.
Right.
Correct. So they get a form from a doctor who basically was only treating her for her knees. They likely sent that for medical review to some other doctor, and that other doctor, basically looking for a reason to deny the claim, ignores everything else and says her knees are fine, go back to work. But what about all the other medical conditions? How did they ignore that?
I'm not even really sure it went that far because they didn't look at anything else.
Well, that's
they
my
basically
point.
just focused in on this one issue with this doctor, and it's this almost nail in the coffin situation. Is once a doctor makes a certain statement about your ability to function at a certain level or return to work in some type of full-time capacity, or says there are no R&Ls, no restrictions and limitations, that's pretty much the green light for the insurance company to terminate a disability claim. That's exactly what happened to her.
So it's just like they took the easy way out. They didn't choose to do take any kind of reasonable action to say, is there anything else going on with you? And what's even more, I think, what's the word, wrongful or intentional to cut off benefits for a claimant, which Guardian periodically does, is the claim person, who's this human being who is supposed to be looking out for the interests of the plan participants, not necessarily for Guardian, but for the plan participants, and say, is there anything else wrong with this person that I could possibly say would be disabling? And that person completely ignored everything else. Because was there any mention of the other medical conditions in the denial letter?
No, actually, there was pretty much just a focus on this knee issue. It was problematic from the extent that because she still actually had limitations from the knees as well. It wasn't like the knee surgery basically was resolved all of the complications and all of the limitations she had. So there was also that issue. It wasn't even accurate what the orthopedic surgeon was saying.
So not only were you dealing with Guardian ignoring other medical records, you were dealing with what we call a surgeon ego complex.
Yeah, sure.
Which surgeon ego complex, for people who don't know what that is I operated on you, how could you not be better? Therefore, if I say that you still have limitations following surgery, then I failed in my surgery and I can't say there's something wrong with you. And it's not common, but it is called surgeon ego complex, and it can be a real problem because a lot of claimants say to us, look, I want to have surgery and I would love to get better, but if I don't get better, is the disability company going to automatically say, you should be better, go back to work? And then we always say, well, make sure your surgeon is on board with this idea that you may have surgery, and will the surgeon still support you if your complaints are still there after? So sorry to sidetrack you on surgeon ego complex, but
no, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you see in some of those congregations where you see the person get healed and they fall back and then they jump up and they're running around, they're walking when they were in a wheelchair 5 minutes earlier. That's almost how the surgeons see themselves. It's as if their surgeries have completely cured them and they're perfect.
So what did you have to do on this appeal?
So basically what we had to do, I had to walk back some of what, and thankfully in this particular case, the surgeon was cooperative, but it's actually a difficult thing because once a bell is rung, it's really hard to unring it. But we did get the surgeon to walk back and at least accurately describe some of the limitations she had and did place a certain level of restrictions on her based on the knees. And then we also went to the rheumatologist. We've got their support, and we customize forms, by the way, for these doctors to fill out and to complete and be very specific about the limitations the person has, the restrictions they have, and kind of also relating to how the duties of their occupation would function on a physical and even cognitive level, because she had some cognitive related issues as well due to the autoimmune issues.
And those custom forms we call custom attending physician statements, how do you believe those are reviewed by the disability insurance company?
You know, it's difficult to say because some insurance companies really prefer everything being done on the forms that they have, but I find it really, I'm hard pressed to think that they would ignore it because it's, I mean, these are statements from the doctors. Whether, you know, the questions are laid out by us, and I think really our forms are very similar to their forms, except they go into more detail. They're not so limited as their forms are. So most companies accept them, and then they take the information in the forms as they're completed by the doctors and take that into account and consideration as part of their review.
And so what was the makeup of your appeal that you ended up submitting? Like, how voluminous was it and what exactly was in it?
So it was relatively extensive because, you know, aside from that, we also sent her out to our own functional capacity therapist who did an examination on her, a physiatrist actually, who did a complete evaluation and examination on her and really laid out the true extent of all her limitations. That was really helpful to the orthopedic surgeon as well because, you know, many times the doctors will say, well, I can't really give an opinion in terms of how long she could sit or stand or walk or handle things. You know, I haven't done any sort of evaluation or occupational exam in that regard. So it was really helpful for the orthopedic surgeon to see, based on testing, where the extent of her limitations were. Then, like I said, we had the forms that we had completed by all her doctors. We had statements that were provided by her husband and people that were kind of witnessing and seeing what was going on with her on a day-to-day basis. All of those things, it really made for a pretty voluminous appeal because we cited to so many exhibits, so many pieces of evidence within the medical records and what we were also supplementing and providing.
And then what was the ultimate outcome, and how is the claim progressing now?
So, fortunately, she was approved through her ONOC and now through her ENEOC. I mean, this is kind of, and that's why it's also important to address both, and that's what I typically would do, because I don't want to back myself or my client into a corner by only addressing the question of own occupation disability, because if the medical evidence at that point in time when we're conducting that appeal supports that they'd be disabled from any or any gainful occupation, I think it's important to address that as well in the appeal, which is what we did, which allowed for this smooth transition into that any occupation stage.
I don't think we discussed that earlier. Can you explain what you mean when you're saying from the own occupation to the any occupation?
So most policies provide for coverage, so to speak, during the first 24 months if you're disabled from your own occupation. In other words, in her case, VP of sales and operations for her company. When you get past that 24 months, it expands that definition of disability to mean any gainful occupation for which you're trained, you have education, experience for. So it really kind of broadens that scope, and it generally gainful. So they're looking at
makes it more difficult for a claimant to continue to be eligible when they go to the any occupation.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does.
And so when you did the appeal, you were arguing for not just the own occupation definition of disability, but also the any gainful occupation definition of disability. And so now that you were able to prove that she's disabled from any gainful occupation, how do you continue to monitor the claim for her?
Well, you don't want the same mistakes happening again. So it's really important to stay on top of the visits that she has with her doctors. I think, look, frequency avoids a lot of these things, and what I mean is frequency of visiting your doctor. Some doctors will say, don't come back for 6 months or a year. I think you're really setting yourself up for a problem, because if that doctor hasn't seen you, if they're not really familiar with what's going on with your conditions and the limitations and the symptoms you're having, then they're probably not going to be supportive, and they're probably not going to accurately describe your restrictions and your limitations when it comes time to report them to the insurance company. So that's one of those things we do really insist that she's seeing her doctors at least every 2 to 3 months, that she's staying on top of all the care and basically treatment that they're prescribing to her. We're making sure that when they do request these forms, that everything is completed properly, accurately. You don't want any sort of mistakes.
So it's not just, hey, you got approved, good luck keeping yourself on claim, because you know that they're reviewing the claim every single month to see if you as a claimant remain eligible for benefits. And if they could find a reason to say that you're not, just like they did when they went to that doctor who said maybe her knees are okay, then they're going to cut off the claim.
Exactly.
So thank you. I mean, congratulations on winning that claim. And obviously I know that the claimant's obviously very happy, and you'll continue to protect her moving forward. For anybody out there who has a Guardian short or long-term disability claim, you can reach out to myself, Caesar, any of our disability lawyers. No matter where you live in the country, we're happy to help you and provide you with a free initial consultation. Should you need us in the future, we look forward to speaking with you. Hi, I'm Gregory Dell, the managing attorney of Dell Disability Lawyers, and I hope you find the video you just watched helpful. We put these videos out all of the time, and we'd love if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Beyond our videos on our YouTube channel, we also have lots of information available on our website at diattorney.com, and we encourage you to come to our website. The goal is that we want you to be educated about the disability insurance process, and when you get to our website, you'll see that we have information all about your specific disability insurance company, your occupation, and your medical condition. And we've designed our website such that you can easily search our website to find things that you may specifically be looking for. Now at our website, we have thousands and thousands of pages of information, hundreds of videos that you can search, plus we're building a section of reviews of all the disability insurance companies, and we have the Ask Our Lawyer section where you can go ahead and ask us any questions that you may have. Now we realize that you may not need us right now, but you may need us in the future to help you with your disability claim, and we think one of the best ways to keep in touch is by clicking the button below and subscribing to our channel. And most importantly, again, no matter where you live in the country, we're always available. Just go ahead and give us a call. We're happy to discuss your claim and let you know immediately if we can help you.